Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Sindy Warren with us. Sindy is the founder at Blue Tree Coaching. She's working with individuals to activate their goals, to help them close the gap where they're now and where they're looking to be. She's action oriented, a result driven coach. She's a lawyer turned entrepreneur, and she's the host of Accelerate Your Vision podcast. This podcast is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start or scale a podcast, go to podfire.com. Sindy, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself, what you're up to nowadays.
Thanks, Charles. I'm so happy to be here. So, what am I up to these days? What a fun question to answer. I live in two places currently, which kind of matches a lot about me, where I have always worn many hats. Well, not always. I would say since my 30s. I'm 52 now. So, went to Stanford Law School, as you mentioned, or maybe that was just before the recording, practiced traditional employment law for about a decade, have my own HR consulting business for nearly 2 decades. In between there, I fell in love with yoga. I've become a yoga teacher. I published a book a few years ago about yoga philosophy. And then it was really just 4 years ago that I found the coaching world and thought, this is cool. Like, you can do this for a living. So I started Blue Tree Coaching, thinking it was going to be a side gig, and it turned into a full-blown growing business. And I coach people on life and business and side hustles, and also full-blown entrepreneurship and midlife transitions. And it's been a blast.
So tell me about the turn from lawyer to HR firm and then the turn to HR to coaching. Why did that happen?
So the first one, and it's interesting because I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur, Charles. But after I had my daughter, who is now just shy of 21, law firm life was not so amenable to just the way I wanted a mother and parent and etc. So I took a little time off, like a month, and literally realized right away, I cannot just raise my child, much as I love her. Like, that's not enough. So I actually had a friend and a mentor who had an HR consulting business. And she was like, why don't you do this? No one's doing this. I was in Cleveland, Ohio. And I thought, okay, I'll try that. Had no idea what I was doing to begin. And it ended up turning into a really great, profitable business where I worked with employers of all sizes, from a mom and pop shop to, a Nestle international conglomerate, doing workplace trainings, investigations, employee relations consulting, and it was law adjacent. So that shift made sense from a subject matter and expertise perspective. Because I was my own boss, I had the flexibility to pursue some passions. I know I mentioned yoga, and did that. I still do that. I'll always do that, at least a little bit on the side, for a lot of years. And the thing about yoga, what I'm most passionate about, is philosophy and all this ancient wisdom, which has been around for 5,000 plus years, is about how to live a good, intentional life. So not everyone, but many people that are drawn to yoga are kind of like seekers. Like, I would describe myself as a seeker, curious. So it was really, coaching was an outgrowth of my passion for yoga. I actually had a friend said to me, you should look into life coaching. And I was like, wait, what's that? So fell into it, fell absolutely in love with it. Turns out I'm a really great coach and I could do that full time. So I decided to shift my focus from HR, which I enjoyed, but wasn't like sole purpose fulfilling, to coaching.
Why are you a great coach?
I'm combine strategic thinking with also really soft skills like empathy, curiosity, great listening. And I think it's the combination of like the lawyer and the yogi. Somehow when they come together, there's like a magical combination that happens that helps me really serve my clients at a high level.
Yeah, I can see lots of good things in yoga, and law, bless. It's like
fair.
It's so stiff, It's like someone that can't touch their toes. and are always quarreling. That's how I see law. What are the good sides of law? What did you learn in your time there? Because I mean, without law, there's chaos in society.
Yeah.
Laws are somewhat like I would qualify it as a bubble in which we can play inside. And they're essential for capitalism. Although
Yeah.
I don't agree with all of the laws, for example, the non-compete laws and so forth, and the
Yes.
monopoly laws. I think the government should just like let us do our thing.
Yep.
What's your take? What's your philosophical take on law, and what did you learn from your time there?
So, law is fascinating intellectually. If you want to be challenged, law provides a great playground. Like, I loved my time in law school so much, like, my brain hurt in a good way. And I love to push myself physically too. I know you do as well. So, I really love a challenge, either for my brain or my body or whatever. So, law provides that. In terms of my area of law, employment law, I think you articulated, Charles, such a brilliant tension between like freedom, but also having some structure. So in the context of employment, yeah, and by the way, I agree with you on non-competes, but businesses should have the ability to run, and employees should have the ability to be free from things like sexual harassment, race discrimination, etc. And that was really the subject area in which I played and developed some level of expertise. So I think employment laws are great. I think sometimes they go too far and swing to the employee side. Sometimes they go too far and swing too far to the employer side. But the thing about the law and litigation in particular, where people are duking it out in court, so to speak, is that hopefully we're finding that balance. Is it always perfect? Absolutely not. But is it a necessary part of a civilized society? I think so.
It's interesting because yeah, sexual harassment and discrimination. I think for folks of my generation, we've built our businesses fully online, and this was never a thing. In
Right.
discrimination, I mean, yeah, I always looked at brains. I don't give a shit about their colors. And their culture might only be interesting to me. I recruited back then mostly Indians, and they were great from a
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
quantity quality perspective. Nowadays, I don't recruit anymore. But where I'm getting at is, I think that older gens are guilty of many things, and specifically folks that don't want to learn and grow anymore, and they use their little moat to their advantage. They're sort of lazy, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to change. I'll just keep on thinking that way forever. They're struggling as well from an energy perspective. They're probably burnt. But I guess this is where the competing laws come in. It's when someone toxically tries to maintain their grounds and do not want to change. They're not flowing. They're like a big boulder blocking the river. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
I actually think that very well said. It's a really interesting concept. And I do think there's a generational difference. It really might be, certainly in the world of online business, it is different. Like the brick and mortar, which is the world I grew up in for sure, and law firms, for the most part, still tend to be brick and mortars and cater to brick and mortar clients, although more and more, online business is obviously exploding. Um, Discrimination and harassment happens more than you would think it does. And there are erroneous allegations of discrimination and harassment more than you think there would be. So it really is. And what I always loved about being, for example, a workplace investigator is like, let me get in there, talk to witnesses, find out what happened, because you can't just assume, oh, if they made a claim, they're telling the truth, or if they're saying it didn't happen, they're telling the truth. Like, you got to get in there and analyze. So again, the people piece of that was always interesting to me, as well as just sort of the wrestling with the analysis of it. But I think you make a great point. It is very, very specific to an older business model.
When you think of AI and law, do you think that it can be smart for me to consult GPT on the surface, then go with a lawyer afterwards? Do you think that
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
a far future, humans wouldn't need laws because it would just be tech based and
mm-hmm.
technology and algorithms would rule everything rather than courts?
I think AI and Chat GPT in particular is obviously brilliant and everyone should know how to use it in some capacity. I know that there have been cases where lawyers have used Chat GPT to draft arguments, and Chat GPT has offered inaccurate case citations, and the lawyers have gotten in trouble for it. Having said that, there's a place for it. So if you're looking for like, hey, Chat GPT, I think is a really good starting place. And then I wouldn't rely on it. It's not a lawyer, lawyers didn't create it. I think you should consult with a lawyer. But I think for lawyers going forward, there are probably some areas of law that AI can and will ultimately replace. And with litigation or things that are going to be in court, criminal law, for example, people make decisions about money, but also about life and death, literally, based on human interaction and impressions and relations. So I think AI can be a really useful tool in law, but I don't think it's ever going to replace the need for lawyers completely.
How does yoga help you push you outside of your comfort zone and keep you in a flow state on a day to day?
I love that question. So there are different aspects of yoga. If we're talking about the physical practice of yoga, I know you're a big meditator also. So meditation, I can answer it both ways. And maybe the answer is the same because it can be exceedingly uncomfortable to just sit in silence with your own thoughts for some of us. When I'm practicing yoga, and I teach and practice physically intense kind of yoga called vinyasa. It's very like I teach a kind of a power vinyasa kind of style. Staying with your breath and staying present presents a challenge. I like to think of the yoga mat as like a laboratory, like throw shit at me, and whatever's deep inside me is going to come up, and I'm going to have to deal with it. So, in that way, I think, and as a 52-year-old woman, I can do arm balances and do things on my hands with my legs in the air that you would not expect a 52-year-old woman to be able to do. So it's amazing for the body. But even more impactful is what it does for my mind and even my spirit, which is give me a context for what I'm doing in life and why. It makes me question things. It makes me hear different perspectives. It feeds a sense of curiosity about like, what's the deal here? What are we all doing in this place called Earth anyway? So, and that can be very comfortable. It can get a little existential. And as I mentioned, I'm drawn to the philosophical aspect of it. In terms of how it keeps me in flow, I think the mindfulness aspect of a yoga practice, again, whether it's physical or meditative or whatever, hopefully both, is an unbelievable tool that will keep you in the present moment, which is the only place flow can happen.
What's your energy balance like? Yeah, mostly testosterone, I feel. So tapping into my inner warrior's natural and the general type, like seeing the terrain as an eagle and know where to or when and where to go down. Um, what's your energy like on a daily basis? Because I think I'm lacking that feminine part, like think I have it. But like definitely,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm cooperative. I'm flowy as well. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
anything personally, but yeah, I think I could use a bit more estrogen, my energy. Like, what's your
Mm-hmm.
take on
Mm-hmm.
that feminine, masculine, and what's your energy like on a day to day?
I'd say I tend to be pretty high energy. Um, I'm a doer. I like to be in action, which is probably a more, male kind of energy generally, which is, and probably explains why over half my clients are men. I work very well with men. Um, I also, of course, embrace the softness, which as a woman, I am not the most feminine woman I know for sure. But I think I'm pretty balanced, probably on the spectrum. Um, and I think we all have to find what's the right balance for me. Sometimes, even though I certainly am not testosterone heavy, I'm just too energetic and I need to balance it with grounding. So I think of it more as like, wait, am I up in the sky or am I really grounded? And I'm looking for the balance in between. And I would say the same thing on like the gender spectrum, male energy, hormones, etc., female energy. And trust me, once you get to be my age, it all shifts a little bit. So you have to really think about like, okay, what are my goals for this decade? And what's the energy I want to bring to it? And how can I enhance that? So I would say I'm pretty balanced, but I'm pretty mindful of it. Before I found yoga, I was way too I ran too anxious. I mean, I sometimes still do, but I was like, I am more grounded now because of that practice than I was a few decades ago.
And listening to you and observing myself, it feels that I'm not grounded. What does that tell about me? Very cerebral, very up in the clouds. Yeah, what does
Mhm.
that tell about me?
You need to find your body. You need to have a breath practice. And it's great to be cerebral and to be a visionary, as you are. Like visionaries aren't typically quite so grounded, but we need to, I think optimal performance and optimal contentment, mental state comes from having a sense of embodiment. Like as I'm sitting here right now, I know my feet are on the floor. And also I'm having a really intellectually and engaging conversation with you. So if you notice you're too heavy grounded, you might need a kick in the ass to get up and do stuff. If you're too much of a visionary, you might need to actually look at things like diet, sleep, hydration, some chiller forms of exercise, like maybe not my yoga class, but someone else's yoga class, etc.
Yeah. As we're talking, I have 1 foot on the ground, legs crossed. So half there. I don't know. That could be an
Uh-huh.
analogy. And
Yeah, totally. That's a good
yeah,
one.
at night I find my wisdom in the stars. And then I look at the city, but it's like I can't relate to the people in that city. What was does that? Because I want to help these people, want to create these
Mm.
game-changing apps. Think there's my skill. I do have a breeding practice. I use othership.com, othership.us,
Mhm.
great company
Mhm.
for that. But yeah, it seems that there's a disconnection between me and my end users. I only work with high performers and I directly
Right.
connect through fiber optic with them. But seems that like the common human, I like this connection with them. So how can I improve on that level?
Well, let me ask you, why do you want to improve on that level first?
To serve, to help. I believe there's wisdom in numbers in democracy.
Yep.
And I've wrestled a lot with that for a time. I didn't believe in democracy, but I think it's
Mhm.
still a great tool for equilibrium. Without democracy, I think the world would be in flames.
Mhm.
So yeah, I want to help the most people um, get the greatest number, do the greatest good for the greatest number. I think that would
Awesome.
be noble.
That's a great answer. So in that case, that's a really compelling reason to try and foster more connection with your end users. And you could do that literally where you live. Put the stars away, they'll be there tomorrow night. Go talk to real people. Just engage with people, whether it's, you know, at the coffee shop or at the gym or at the yoga studio. Like talk to the kinds of people you want to help.
Yeah, that's great. I'm liking that. I'm liking a physical community here, and that's what I'm working on to build. Easier said than done. What's your take on retirement?
I have so many thoughts on retirement. And I actually just created a free resource on how to sort of navigate that decision making process called uh, Planning Your Next Chapter. So many of my clients, not all, but many are in midlife considering it. I don't think retirement today in 2024 is the same as retirement was when my parents, who were 80, retired. You don't just stop working one day and sail off into the sun and live happily ever after. So I think it's actually more a period of time to redefine and refine. I think we all have to have something that brings us purpose and a deeper sense of meaning and connection and joy. And whether it's paid work or not, it's got to be something. I work with a lot of people who are leaving CEO kinds of roles or other C-suite executives who are stepping down from that, kind of semi-retiring. And what many of them doing are starting their own consulting businesses. I mean, if you're a C-suite executive, you have so many skills, so much knowledge that you could be sharing with people coming up the ranks. So they do it by hanging their own proverbial shingle. And there are people that are like, okay, I've got the financial means at this point. I just want to travel and I'm getting my passion there. So I think there are a lot of different ways to plan, a retirement in a way that feels fulfilling and meaningful, but it's not the way we grew up thinking about retirement.
What's your purpose nowadays?
Helping people discern theirs and bring it to life.
Do you feel that's driving you as much as much as it was driving you as a lawyer back then, or at the helm of your HR firm?
I don't think I had a purpose back then. I think, like, to be perfectly honest, I went to law school because I was graduating, at the top of my class at Tufts University in Boston. I was like, well, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll go to law school. And then I went to law school. I graduated with a ton of student loans and thought, all right, I'll go to a big firm because now I got to pay off all the loans. Then you get used to a certain style of living. So it's like, oh, HR consulting, that sounds lucrative. I'll do that. None of that. And I liked all of it. I enjoyed all of it, but it wasn't until I was a little bit older and I think found yoga and had some early on kind of existential crises that I really tapped into even thinking about it. So I love the fact that you're even, at your stage of life asking that question. And I think it changes over life. It's not just like my only purpose in life is to be a life coach or a business coach or a yoga teacher. Those are all parts of my purpose. But I think purpose can be almost like a big blanket where we're weaving different parts of it together and it evolves as the decades go on.
Yeah, because career is like 50% of your life. Like, and let's say that you did that for 20 years. How did you not lose yourself? Was it hard to find yourself back?
Yeah, I think I did lose myself for a little while. And then I think there was something inside me that was like, wait a minute, this isn't aligned. This doesn't feel like, I remember I was in my late 20s. I had a moment of like, what the fuck just happened? Like, how is this my life? And I made some very significant changes. Like, sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was had a law school sweetheart I married. We divorced 2 years later, and I've been married to my current husband with whom we have a child, for decades now.
What are your struggles nowadays?
So, like you said, you're trying to build community where you are physically. This living both outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and also in South Carolina is really fun and exciting, but also challenging because it's like I now I need to build two communities. And when I'm away from my home in Ohio for several months, I need to really focus on shoring it up again when I'm back, apart from, the 2 or 3 people I talk to every day. And then the same thing happens here in Hilton Head, building connections, building community. So that's a challenge, but it's one that I'm very grateful to have. I'm not, feeling sorry for myself about it, but a sense of community, I think, is really important, and even more so as we're aging.
What are your clients struggling with?
Midlife transitions, mostly. Many of them, probably about, I don't know, 50 or 60%, are trying to start a service-based online business. And others are just like, like I said, like the C-suite or the CEO who's like, okay, what is next? Or does retire and then wakes up and is like, do I even like this person that I wake up next to every morning? Like those sorts of transitional mini crises, if you will.
That's a painful one. The last one, I can't imagine myself going through this.
No, that one
How
sucks.
did they get there? What's wrong with society, last but not least, and how would you attack the societal problem that we're facing?
A lack of compassion is at the heart of a lot of our societal ills. Thinking we're the center of the universe, and of course we all are the center of our own universes, But when we focus so much on ourselves, we take away our ability, I think, to focus on those around us. And I think purpose, when it's tied to being of service in some way, and it doesn't have to be to, thousands or hundred thousands of millions of people, it could be, to my little corner of the world, we do so much better as a society. So I think the grassroots community involvement is something that would help foster that sense of compassion and connection that is so vital to the human race.
Love that. Where can people find out more about you, Sindy?
My website is bluetreecoaching.net. I'm at Blue Tree Coaching on Instagram. I'm just my name on LinkedIn, and I spell my name with an S, Sindy Warren, Warren. And I got a fun podcast called Accelerate Your Vision on all the platforms.